generally support expansion, but the devil is in the details. I want to make sure that there's more opportunity for teams in our subdivision. And if it creates additional opportunities, whether it's at large or through AQs that would come to our subdivision, then I am all for that. I do want to make sure that we protect the integrity of the event, make sure that it's a true postseason, make sure that folks are earning their way into the playoff.
Welcome to Wait What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast where we take a sometimes irreverent, sometimes cynical, and yes, even a sometimes serious look at the business of sports. I'm your co-host, Tim McGhee.
And I'm David Parro.
David, you're coming to us from the road this week. What's on your mind?
Well, not the road in the typical sense, but yes, on the road. I'm in the suburbs of Chicago, staying with my daughter and her family. It's been a great trip, getting to see some Chicago peeps and, business relationships that have been great. We'll talk about that as the show goes on, but the trip has been great, so thank you for that. We just came off the Tour Championship. Tommy Fleetwood, who it was, had, I guess, garnered the best player not to win.
Yeah. No, I would say, arguably.
On tour, and had what had to be or seemed to be a demoralizing loss a couple weeks back, comes through in the clutch, wins the $10 million FedEx money, wins the Tour Championship.
Qualifies now for the Ryder Cup.
Right. And he's one of those guys that obviously has been very, very well liked. So it was an exciting end to the season and, of course, setting up for the Ryder Cup. But as the tournament kicked off from outside of Atlanta, Brian Rolapp, the new CEO of the PGA Tour, had what I guess would be considered a pretty big, bold first initiative in that he has set up a committee headed by Tiger Woods, featuring the one and only Theo Epstein, who is regarded as one of the great baseball minds, having brought the Boston Red Sox to a World Series, moving over to the Cubs, my Cubs, and leading that team to a World Series, and also being very involved in some of the changes at Major League Baseball, pitch clock, etc. So he's the type of business executive that shakes things up. But what's really interesting is that what they're saying is nothing is off the table. The only thing that they want to make sure that they preserve is the current meritocracy of the PGA Tour. Now, that's an obvious little dig at LIV, which while they have standings and they compete, they are paid in advance, and therefore that's been a bit of a knock, is that the meritocracy is out the window, and you have seen some of the great players just fall off the cliff in terms of their performance. Cam Smith, Dustin Johnson, Harold Varner III, just three examples right there that have played horribly since moving over to LIV. Anyway, shortening of the season, different way the tournaments work. PGA Tour has not changed that much in an awfully long time. So it'll be really interesting to see what they come up with. But I think that's a major story, a major move by Rolapp in the new role. The timing is very interesting as we head into Ryder Cup, because it will keep golf very much in the news, from obviously now through Ryder Cup.
Yeah, it's, I think we talked about it early on that the tour needed LIV more than LIV needed the tour. I think that is continuing to sort of flip on its axis. I think Brian Rolapp is hitting the ground running, not necessarily sticking to his comfort zone in terms of media right out of the gate, really taking a bold and broad look at the sport and the organization with that committee.
Yeah, what's neat about it is that Monahan may not have been able to make this move, right? This is bring someone new in, fresh thinking, even though Jay is still in his position technically, to go this direction. And I think it with Tiger at the, leading that in this reimagining, it looks like they'll get the, some strong player backing in to make this work. But I think if you're a LIV fan or have been supportive of the reasons LIV was created, you can continue to say they're simply doing what we told them they should have been doing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's going to be a fun story. It makes me more excited even heading in. Not only this change, but of course, Fleetwood winning, what that means for an English player, of course, what that means heading into Ryder Cup. And man, we have two guests actually coming on in a couple weeks that we're super excited about to talk about Ryder Cup further. But on to you. What's your big one?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about MLB and their supposed new rights deals. I don't think anything is official, but what we're hearing now is that NBC is going to be taking over Sunday Night Baseball from ESPN. So for the last, 12 years or whatever it's been since they've had Sunday Night Football, that is, I think, virtually every week. I don't think there's been a week where it hasn't been the number one program on TV. So it looks like they're creating this other appointment viewing block, which will dovetail nicely with football. At least the beginning of the season, right? I don't know what happens when you get to September, where pennant races heat up, but the NFL season starts.
Mhm.
That remains to be seen. ESPN, which had opted out of their deal earlier this year, is now back. I will not make fun of my fellow Cornellian and fraternity brother Jimmy Pitaro, but you're out, you're back in. You create a DTC platform, and what do you call it? ESPN. I mean, there's some questionable moves, but ESPN gets basically what's MLB TV, the out-of-market games, as well as the local rights for, I think, 5 clubs, the Diamondbacks, Guardians, Padres, Rockies, and Twins that MLB had taken over. And that's, I don't think there's anything particularly surprising there. But then Netflix is supposedly going to get the home run derby. And what I find interesting in that is Netflix continues to lean in on one-off sporting events as opposed to going for the rights for season-long streaming rights. So I don't know how well that will do in the beginning for the home run derby. The home run derby has sort of lost its luster over the last few years. It'll be interesting to see what it does in terms of numbers and interest, and if there are any changes to the format to keep it fresh.
Yeah, I think Netflix is such an interesting factor in all of this. They will be airing NFL games. They have not jumped in 100% to every rights negotiation that they could be going after, but they did get the NFL games, and as you say, do these one-offs in really, really well. I think they're also committed to the various, docuseries that they do, and they're playing this game at an interesting time because the streaming numbers continue to impress. Streaming usage in the U.S. reaching a record 47.3% in July of viewing. That's how people are viewing television, and I think Netflix continues to be in a really strong position in that area. Going back to the point about MLB, I think it was a show a long time ago when we said, ESPN is going to be out at for the MLB deal. And then about 2 weeks after that, I think you said, well, maybe they're not out. And now it looks like, and I don't know if Jimmy was just playing it, all along in that regard, or Manfred was. But I think it's a nice place for them to be. And I think with the complement of what is going on, as you opened up with NBC, et cetera, on that MLB deal, I think fans will have an interesting platform. I'm personally disappointed, as I've said on this show, that I loved the production value of what Apple brought, but that doesn't look like that's sticking around. And I don't think they ever truly caught traction with it, but man, it was a hell of a production. So I do hope that as streamers take on, that they've learned something and continue to learn from what Apple has done.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, as the saying goes. So we'll see if anybody picks up on what they've done. But interestingly, we joke, but the DTC app is now out for ESPN, $29.99 a month. You can also bundle it with Disney Plus and Hulu. So it does play in nicely to this whole idea of the app having these out-of-market games. So I think it is a situation in which, Manfred is saying, listen, we're making more than we would have given up if ESPN had just walked away. And now ESPN is getting what it needs as it heads in a new direction and, continues to manage, and stay ahead of that landslide that is cord cutting.
You mentioned the app and the bundle with Hulu, but they also are planning to offer a bundle with Fox Sports.
Yes.
My understanding is, this is a Cheesecake Factory menu we're dealing with in our television choices now. It's freaking me out because, I've cut the cord. I don't think you have, but I've cut the cord.
I haven't, but I'm so glad you said that because I was literally thinking about hiring my daughter to figure out how to get rid of cable, but then get all the channels that I want and do so in such a way that I'm at least not paying more.
Well, here's what I'll tell you, and this might upset you. This isn't going to be good news, but you will definitely feel right off the bat that you're saving money because you'll narrow it down. But
Okay.
soon enough. Now, the one thing is YouTube TV. I'm a YouTube TV. I was an early adopter, believe it or not. The price increases have been significant and swift, unfortunately. So at first it was an unbelievable deal, but they've continued to go up, obviously, as programming charges have gone up from the producers, because they are, they're a bundle similar to a cable, but just a little smaller, and of course streaming. So that has driven the cost up. And then as you add Apple or Netflix, HBO Max, which you need them all. And so
I think I have them all. I'm trying to think what I don't have. I have them all. I have everything I need.
Yeah, there needs to just be a bundle of bundles. Like there needs to be the bundle, the ultimate bundle. But then we'll be in a monopoly situation.
You'd have to have Andy Reid talking about the old bundle rooski.
Yeah, well, okay. So that's the thing. State Farm could sponsor the entire bundle and reduce our prices. Like, when did sponsorship stop being about adding that value to the end user? In this case, us as like big time television consumers, and therefore,
and us meaning just you and I.
Of course, because that's all that matters to us right now. Hey, one of the stories we didn't get to last week, and not that we have to spend that much time on it, is that we had mentioned that the Trail Blazers were going to be sold in a quick sale. It seems, I think by normal timing on these, is that they did go to the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes. You could do your joke if you want. I'm just setting it up. But Tom Dundon.
It's incredible how much money you can make from lending your name to a sound effect in a TV show. For those of you who watch the Law and Order franchise, Dundon.
People, I just let him go sometimes because I might know where he's going to go.
The joke writes itself.
Yeah. So $4.25 billion, another team that is selling. They don't own their venue. It's owned by the Portland municipality. And in another big news on the NBA side is the Celtics deal to Bill Chisholm finally did get approved, and that was the $6.1 billion blockbuster deal that went to them that also didn't include the venue. So that was, interesting news, big deals. Obviously, NBA continues. And maybe there's just that much more activity going on with the NBA, but certainly things that bode very well for the rest of the owners around the league.
Yeah, no, I think we talked about it in the past. If Jim Dolan ever looks to sell, I don't think $20 billion is out of the realm of possibility, given all of the assets that he owns.
Yeah, would agree with that. What else?
A couple more quick hits.
Yeah.
Before we take a break and welcome our guest. Interesting, Man U versus Arsenal set the record for the most watched opening match on the NBC platform, 2 million viewers, which was not the largest audience ever, but the biggest opening weekend match ever. So I think that bodes well for the Premier League this year. There's some great stories that are going to be going on. It looks like, at least from the first match, Man City might be back this year. But by comparison, the Big Three tournament, right, the basketball tournament, on CBS, the playoffs got 850,000 viewers. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
For a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. Sticking on the numbers, WNBA has already set their attendance record for the season. 2.364 million have come through the turnstiles already, with several weeks left to go in the season. So they're going to shatter that record. They're averaging over 11,000 fans per game, and there's a couple of those teams that are playing in small venues. So I think everything continues to trend really positively for
and I think
league.
as the big star names spread out around the league and expansion continues, and we know that we're going to be continuing to get a good slate of players coming out of the college ranks into the league, and so much more attention on things like the draft and so forth. I think there should be an expectation that things continue now. Caitlin Clark being somewhat injury prone, it seems, not that she's not getting banged up, hasn't helped. And I think that these numbers could possibly even be more significant. But Paige Becker's stardom is everything you and I expected it would be. I mean, she's just such a phenomenal player, and she's going to start carrying some of that as well. So, we talked. Was it a couple weeks ago on the show about the situation that was going on in the league, and we put up a post on it, and we got somewhat the reactions, I guess we would suspect that some people were just saw it and kind of put up their goofy responses about that they did think it was funny, because the whole crux of the bit was is this actually funny? Like, why do sports fans think this is funny? And that was my big point, was why did traditional sports fans, and that's what was bothering me, seem to think that this is a funny thing, and that, maybe they just don't want to accept the success of this particular league, and that's on them for what their reasons are.
Yeah, they actually made an arrest of the guy at the Barclays Center who threw it out. And what I read was he could get up to 5 years in prison, but they don't think he would. And I'm thinking, well, why not? Why not make an example of this person? And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but somebody threw one out at an NFL preseason game the other day. And it's those crypto bros, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where it happens. It's ridiculous.
That's someone trying to say, look, see, it wasn't
Yeah.
anything about. That's so ridiculous.
Oh, sure, we believe you.
All right,
So-
want to head into the break?
Yeah, that works. We've got
All
a
right.
great guest coming up.
It's time for our guest.
With the fall college sports season upon us, including, of course, college football, it was a perfect time to have a leader on from that space, and we're delighted to welcome Keith Gill, now in his 6th season as commissioner of the Sun Belt Conference. Before the Sun Belt, where he became the first African American to lead a football bowl subdivision conference, Keith served as athletic director at the University of Richmond, as AD at American University, and as a senior associate AD at the University of Oklahoma. A career focused on college athletics, Keith has also had leadership stints at Vanderbilt and the Atlantic 10 Conference, and if being a commissioner of a group of 5 conference isn't enough, Keith is also currently serving as the chair of the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee, which, among other things, has the often thankless task of selecting the teams for the NCAA tournament. So, Keith, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks, Tim. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Now, there's one thing I didn't mention to you, and I felt like we needed to absolutely be transparent here. So I apologize for this, but I was worried that you might not come on. I know you're a proud Duke alum, played football at Duke. I went to Wake Forest. Tim is a Cornell grad, but inexplicably pulls for Carolina. So I just want to make sure you knew that going in, so we don't have any problems. But we like to be honest with our
Now,
guests.
Tim, are you from North Carolina? Is there an excuse?
No, there's none.
I will say 2 things. Number 1, huge Cooper Flag fan, huge Coach K fan.
Okay.
But I grew up playing basketball with a coach who was a disciple of Coach Smith, and just started rooting for North Carolina as a kid back in the days of Michael Corrin, Rich Yoniker, even going back to Phil Ford at the beginning of my fandom. Thank you for overlooking that, or at least
No worries.
pretending.
Robert Cunningham is a close friend, so
Okay.
I've got a fond heart in some things, Carolina.
Tim's actually, and I like to brag about my co-host here. Tim is the chair of the Naismith Award for the next couple years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump in. The college Sun Belt season kicks off this Thursday when conference member Louisiana Monroe hosts St. Francis. Just from a high level, what are you expecting from the Sun Belt Conference this football season? Obviously, you have some very competitive teams, and particularly given that you're in a group of 5 conference, what do you think might this season play out?
Yeah, so I think, when you think about Sunbelt football, we've been on just really a tremendous trajectory over the last 5 to 7 years. And so I think we'll keep that momentum. But the one thing that we haven't done in that time is make a New Year's Six Bowl, or now that the college football playoff and New Year's Six kind of got integrated, make it to the college football playoff. And I'm certainly think we've got the teams to do that this year. And so that's really where our focus is going to be. I think we've got some really good teams. So we'll have another solid year. If you think about the last few years in the Sun Belt, we have had great kind of postseason winning percentage. We only trail the Southeastern Conference in terms of bowl winning percentage in the BCS era. We've had great success against our peer conferences in the non-conference in terms of our record, against the American, against the Mountain West, and against Conference USA and the MAC. So, I expect those things to continue, but making it to the CFP is a goal of ours, something that's really important to who we are and what we do. And so I think that's going to be our focus this year.
So speaking of that, what are your thoughts on expanding the college football playoffs? And if you're in favor, which I assume you are, how would you like to see it play out?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. What I would say is I generally support expansion, but the devil is in the details. I want to make sure that there's more opportunity for teams in our subdivision. And if it creates additional opportunities, whether it's at large or through AQs that would come to our subdivision, then I am all for that. I do want to make sure that we protect the integrity of the event, make sure that it's a true postseason, make sure that folks are earning their way into the playoff. But I do think, as a general rule, provided the details are good, I'm supportive of expansion, and particularly if it's going to create more opportunities for our subdivision.
Before I hand it back over to David, we have a tradition on this show where when one of our guests acknowledges a particularly good question, we want to give credit to the co-host who wrote it. And you can tell by David's posturing and peacocking there that he wrote that question. And I think it's safe to say that at this point, 3/4 of the way through the year, he leads in good questions. So
this is our 4th year of doing this, believe it or not. And this is, I think, the only year that I've led in this category. So I'm very proud of that. It's interesting what you
get flowers.
Yeah.
You get flowers.
It is interesting because you talk about the expansion and that you want to make sure that if it's done right, not just because does that help the Sun Belt potentially get someone in when, as you mentioned before, I mean, JMU in particular is a team that I think a lot of people think has a shot to legitimately make the CFP in its current format, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think you want to have a legitimate national championship. I mean, I don't think you want to have some gimmicky thing where you've got, teams that people don't believe are deserving to participate in a national championship.
Yeah.
And so I certainly supported the expansion to 12 teams. I think I support, 16 under the right circumstances. And I'm open to the discussion. But yeah, and I think we've got several teams that are going to be pretty good this year. JMU is one of those. Louisiana has a really, really good kind of deep roster. And so, there'll be 3 or 4 Sun Belt teams that when we get down to the end of the season, will have an opportunity to compete for that CFP spot.
So the college sports landscape has obviously shifted seismically over the last few years. Talk about the key challenges you face across the myriad of all of these things: NIL, transfer portal, Title IX challenges, et cetera. The narrowing of power conferences, sports betting, all those things. Like what are you seeing as the challenges that you can actually focus on and dig in on?
I really think, for me, one of the biggest things is the transfer portal. I really think like a lot of the issues that come up from NIL are about the movement and the fact that you can have so much movement on an annual basis now. I just think that is asking a lot for the system. I think it's bad for academic outcomes. I think it makes the market not really a market. I mean, I think it just really just creates situations where you're always being leveraged, and it's not really a true market. And so I really think, like, if you had a magic wand, you can only solve one thing. I think trying to put some guardrails around the transfer space. I think if you did that, I think it would calm things in some really significant ways. I do think the NIL piece is important, though. I think that having all the different state laws is really a challenge. I think trying to get some help from Congress to create some consistency in that space would be really helpful, and also bring a little clarity on, kind of the Title IX aspect and how you allocate the money and those kind of things. So I would start with the transfer portal. Certainly try to find some guardrails for name, image, and likeness as well. It's it's a topsy turvy time, and I think it will be for a little while. But hopefully we're with the House settlement and with time and some adjustment, we're getting to a point where things will be a little calmer.
Well, I want to dig in a little bit more deeply into those two issues, the House settlement and NIL more broadly. Do you think, given what's going on in that area, have we lost something that makes college sports unique and special, or are David and I just two old guys who are shaking our fist at the cloud because things aren't the way they used to be when we were growing up as college football fans?
Yeah, I might put that in the, more than one thing can be true. I mean, I think you guys might be the get off my lawn crew, but you also may be right as well, right? I do think we've lost some things, right? I think this is a lot more transactional. I think the focus on academics, whether it's from recruits and their parents or even institutions, that's shifting in ways that I don't think are positive. I think the reality is, for most college athletes, the degree is still going to be the most important thing that they get. And so any kind of de-emphasis of that or taking the eye off of that, I think is a problem, because I think I'm a product of getting a degree, and I would not have been a good enough student athlete that I would have made enough NIL money to kind of carry me through my life, and that degree was going to be key. So I do think we've lost something. I do think these changes are, the end of the world either. I don't feel like the sky's falling, but I do think we need to have some guardrails. We need to have some regulations that make things kind of sensible and not make it the wild, wild west. So I think both of those things are true. I think we've lost something, but I also think the system is moving in a natural way with the money that's kind of been allocated there. But I do think we've got to figure out how to manage it and control it a little better.
Conference realignment, want to talk about that a little bit. Over the last few years, it seems like anytime you think there may be a détente between conferences and so forth, then some other big news drops. Do you feel that conference realignment, particularly at the Power 4 level, affects what you're doing at the Sun Belt, or is it always just business as usual, focus on what you guys need to do?
No, I think there absolutely is impact. If you think about, the changes that we made to our conference in 2021, we ended up, two schools that didn't play football in our conference. They ended up leaving and going to another conference. We added 4 football playing schools. That all started with Texas and Oklahoma and their shift. In our last realignment, Texas State is leaving the Sun Belt. We're adding Louisiana Tech. That really started because the Big Ten and the Big 12 and kind of their impact on the Pac-12. So for us, it absolutely, what happens in the autonomy conferences really does impact us. It seems like it always starts kind of the dominoes of realignment. And so it's really important for us to be connected, kind of understanding what's going on in that space, knowing what the potential circumstances are so that we can make good decisions and keep our momentum going. And I really am pleased. We've been very, very lucky in the realignment space. In 2021, we certainly got better. And I think at our level, if you look at realignment, teams aren't or conferences aren't generally getting better. They usually are getting diminished. And I would also say in our most recent realignment, the addition of Louisiana Tech allows us to be even better at something that's really important to us: regional rivalries, creating opportunities for our fans to travel to games, kind of making travel simple, adding a team that's really good in sports that are important to us: football, basketball, baseball, softball. And so, I think in the last 2 realignment cycles, we've been able to get it right and been able to get better, which has been helpful. But it's certainly, what happens at the autonomy level doesn't just stay there. It certainly has impacts on our subdivision too.
In his introduction, David mentioned that you're Duke University grad, played football there. Compare your experience as a student athlete to what student athletes are experiencing today. And I know that's a very broad question.
Yeah, I just think my experience was just really simple. I went to school, I went to class, and I went and played football, and I hung out with my friends. I didn't have all the social media. I didn't have all the NIL and all the things that people are trying to do to make money. I just think that student athletes right now, they have so much coming at them. It's not even comparable to being a student athlete in 1992, like I was, to now being one in 2025. I just think they have so many things that just take them away from some of the core things that are really important, whether that's school or actually participating. I just think there's so many different things to do just with just in the NIL space, doing stuff with collectives and trying to build your brand on TikTok and doing dances and teaching clinics and just doing all the things that they're doing right now. Pretty much now, like a student athlete, it seems like it's an independent business. They've kind of hung their shingle and they're trying to do those kinds of things. So I think I had it a lot easier. I think, I really was able to kind of pour myself into my collegiate experience. I think that's just a little more challenging now. But I think those things that they're learning are things that are going to help them in the future. They'll be better prepared for when they graduate and when they move forward. But I certainly think it's different.
Yeah, thanks for that. Obviously we see all these things. It's interesting to get the perspective from someone that played within the type of conference you did and now are overseeing a conference like that to express what those changes may be like. I want to skip ahead to basketball because we mentioned in the intro that you were serving as the chair of the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee, which of course oversees the selection process. Anything new you can tip to us that might be coming this year? Any changes? We certainly recognize, because Tim and I are glued into that show, of course, every year, and we'll really be looking forward to it this year. But there's always surprises and things, and anything you're trying to fix, get better at, or just can expect from the broadcast standpoint.
Yeah, I really think the biggest thing for us is expansion, trying to make a final decision on whether or not the tournament's going to expand. So hopefully over the course of the next, 6 to 12 months, we'll have kind of an answer in that space. And I think I've certainly read enough articles to know that people have strong feelings one way or the other, and so the committee is kind of trying to, weigh all that and weigh the information and make that determination. So I think that will be kind of a big issue that the committee wrestles with, and certainly will create some interest in those kind of things. Other than that, I think it'll be business as usual. Still, I don't know that we have any metric changes. Last year we added wins above bubble, which the committee kind of used pretty extensively last year for the first time. And so we'll continue to kind of refine that and that use. But I think it'll be a pretty kind of straightforward kind of year relative to the selection process. I don't think there'll be a whole lot of changes there. But I do think, if we get to a conclusion on expansion, that'll certainly be kind of a bombshell moment coming out of the basketball committee and the NCAA.
Before we let you go, Keith, we have two questions that we ask all of our guests. So if you'll indulge us for just a couple more minutes. The first one is,
where'd your career get started? Where'd you start it?
Yeah, I got my start. I was an intern at the NCAA. So when I started, when I graduated from college in 1990, I worked on campus at Duke in event services for that summer, kind of helping them with kind of their, external kind of conference services that they provided to outside groups. And then I got an internship at the NCAA. So there were 8 interns at the time. And that's how I kind of got my foot in the door. And I eventually got hired on full time at the NCAA. I'm doing rules compliance. So I have a rules compliance background. And that's how I got my start in college athletics.
And for somebody looking to break into the industry, what one piece of advice would you give them?
Yeah, the one piece of advice I would give them is to just look at everything as an opportunity. I think I run across folks now where, they're getting their start. You ask them to do something, they're kind of weighing whether it's worth their time and whether they should do it. People are saying no to opportunities now at a level that I never saw. Like when I was an intern, I said yes to everything. Anytime anybody asked me to do anything, I looked at it as an opportunity, a chance to grow, a chance to get better at something. And so I don't know that folks look at it as in the same way. And so that's what I would encourage. Everything is really an opportunity to grow and impress someone. You just never know what connection is going to lead you to a job or lead you to something that really is beneficial in your life. So I think you treat all those interactions as really special, as something that you need to nurture, and all those opportunities as something that you need to really do a really good job on to help you kind of grow and thrive. So that would be my advice to folks trying to get started in the businesses. Just say yes in terms of work assignments and opportunities, and pour yourself into those relationships. And I think that means good things will happen.
Yeah, that's tremendous advice, and we appreciate that. We've heard from some of our past guests that have framed these things in different ways, but there are some commonalities there. And in this business in particular, you really don't know what it is that you're going to be great at and what you're going to love doing. So you have to expose yourself to those opportunities. So thank you for speaking to that point so eloquently. We can't thank you enough. We know you have a lot of stuff cranking up here this weekend. So good luck with the season. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we hope to see you down the road.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. So
great. Thank you. really great to have Commissioner Keith Gill join us as we launch into college football season this weekend in a big way. So, Tim, it's the time of the show. We look ahead or give random shout outs or share any other tidbit that we may have forgotten in our upfront part. So, what do you have your eye on?
Yeah. So first thing I want to do is we've talked about gambling scandals, betting scandals on this show on multiple occasions. And one of the things that we talked about was Malik Beasley, who played last year for the Detroit Pistons. He was getting ready to be tendered an offer to play for the Pistons this coming season, excuse me. When it came out that he was potentially a target of an FBI investigation, not sure whether or not it was or was not related to the Dejounte Porter case, but the offer was rescinded, and we went through a summer not hearing anything about it. Well, earlier last week, it was announced that Malik Beasley is no longer a target of that FBI investigation. And it reminds me of the Labor Secretary Ray Donovan under Ronald Reagan, who was indicted for crimes and ultimately he was acquitted. And he famously said, "What office do I go to get my reputation back?" And it reminds me of that situation. As they say, the indictment's on the first page, or in the case of a sports story, on the back page, and the retraction, the correction, or the acquittal usually gets buried deep within the
Right.
section. So I think we owe it to our listeners when something like this happens to bring that up. Much lighter notes, Happy Gilmore 2, which we've talked about on this show, had the best week ever for a Netflix movie. 2.9 billion minutes viewed, which is, I guess, how Netflix
The streamers look at it.
measures success. And then last but certainly not, I'm a big card collector. I can say that I was not the buyer of the most expensive sports card sold in history, a one-of-one Michael Jordan Kobe Bryant card with a jersey patch and autograph from each player on it. Sold for $12.9 million, surpassing the record for $12.6 million for a Mickey Mantle rookie card. Comes out that the buyer is Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank.
Mr. Fabulous?
Not a big fan of his, quite honestly.
Mr. Wonderful or Mr.
Yeah,
Fabulous?
not a
What is
big.
he?
I have other sobriquets for him, but it did set the record for the most expensive sports card
Wow.
ever sold. So, what about
Wow.
yourself? What do you got on?
Well, a couple things. We cover the sports betting world because it's an important and very important part of this business. And I appreciate you bringing that up about Malik Beasley. We need to be super, super careful before we talk about it and make sure that we're talking about it in the sense of how it's affecting the business, because it is important to follow, and there are potentials for these scandals to keep coming up. So, but great that you called that out here. I was expecting you to say that you were the card purchaser, but someday.
Well, I
someday.
actually was, but my wife was listening in earlier in
Okay,
the
yeah.
conversation, so I just want to
So
keep it on the DL.
mostly shout outs from my side here. The sports world, and certainly the world of motorsports, lost their P.T. Barnum last week when Humpy Wheeler, famously the head of Charlotte Motor Speedway, then Lowe's Motor Speedway, and then Charlotte Motor Speedway, passed away. And this guy was legend. I had a chance to not only meet him, but do some work with him. And you talk about a guy. The only person that he reminds me of from an energy of idea standpoint was David Stern. And the stuff that would just pop out of his head and how quick he would try to get to an idea. No idea was too big for him. And in fact, he hated small ideas. So he, was known for having, like shark fights, daredevil jumps, reenacting war scenes at the speedway. He would do anything, and I think anybody that worked for him, I think owes him and will say that to their ability to think big promotionally. I want to give a thanks out to past guest Vanessa Tavares of AUSL and Athletes Unlimited. Had a great time checking out the AUSL All-Star Cup in Rosemont, Illinois, yesterday with some family members, including my 3-year-old grandson, who had an absolute blast being there. So great job. And it was great seeing a friend of mine, Lloyd Richards, who is handling management of events and logistics of the league now and the entire organization. So he's found a really great spot, and I'm happy for him, and it's good that he's there. And then also a quick thank you to Lily Umfred, who helped with the ticketing. So I wanted to make sure I included her. Congrats to the Chinese Taipei for winning the Little League World Series. This was they used to dominate, as you'll recall.
Right.
I think it's their record 18th championship, but they haven't won one since 1996 when you and I were watching it like younger. They just kind of dominated there.
I thought you were going to say when you and I were playing in
When
the
you and I,
Little League World Series.
but they ended up beating Las Vegas, who made it through the U.S. side, which happened to be the team that walloped Clarendon Hills, my Little League team, in the first. But just so the quality of play is just so great.
So much fun to watch.
So good, so good. A couple things, very excited, as you pointed out last week, to start getting into the U.S. Open tennis action from Queens here in New York. Well, not here because I'm in Chicago right now, but we'll be back for a good amount of it. I also need to tune into the Women's Rugby World Cup, which I haven't yet. U.S. plays Australia this Saturday. They got off to a very rough start by getting crushed by England in the first match, and might be a tough time against Australia as well. But this is such an interesting time for women's sports because we talked about AUSL, we talked about WNBA on this show. There's so many metrics pointing in a positive direction, and rugby is another one of those sports that's been on the map. That's gotten on the map recently. So I'm looking forward to catching a little bit of that, hopefully over the next week. So I think it's time to shut this thing down. I think a big thanks first to Keith Gill of the Sunbelt Conference for joining us during a very, very busy time. Tim, as always, thanks for a great, fun discussion. Most importantly, thank you, listeners, for taking a bit of time with us. Look for us across any platform and on social media. One easy way to find us now is to go to dpandmcgee.com. And you'll find latest episodes, you'll find our social links and so forth. So that's an easy place to go. Just simple, DP and McGhee. Couldn't be easier. Let us know what you think. Feedback continues to be not only important to us, but very much appreciated. So that's it. Until next time, I'm DP, he's McGhee, and we'll talk soon.